Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Beneath the Silence, Healing the Wounds of Betrayal Trauma. Today, we're going to talk about betrayal trauma symptoms. But before we get there, I just want to thank everyone for listening, for tuning in, for sharing the YouTube links or on, any social media. Um, or on the podcast forum. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And please leave a comment. If there's something that you want to know more about, please leave that as well, or send me an email or go through my website at sandrajoy.ca. All the links are in the description of the podcast, whether on YouTube or on the podcast forums. So thank you so much. And a warm welcome to those of you who are tuning in for the first time and or are back for episode 3 after watching the first 2. So last time we talked about how betrayal trauma differs than what we know as commonly as trauma in society and the impact of that. Um, and it goes right into why I'm doing trauma symptoms this week is because while there are similarities to the symptoms we have in any trauma, regardless if it's betrayal trauma or I just call societal trauma, what we commonly know as trauma in society. But there's many more on top of it that may not be experienced in commonly known trauma. So that's what we're going to do today. And I also just want to remind everyone that I don't edit these videos or the audio. It doesn't get edited. I want it to be real, authentic, raw, and vulnerable because if I can't be vulnerable, if I can't show you I'm human and I make mistakes and I have to glance at my notes and I have most of it up in here, but I do have to look at my notes to make sure I'm covering everything I had wanted to cover. Um, I'm going to make errors. I'm going to screw up. That's human. And it's okay. It's okay. We're perfectly imperfect. And it's the only place that the word perfect comes into play because otherwise it's unattainable. Especially if we've experienced betrayal trauma. That's, the message we have inside is I'm not enough, and we try to do more and more and be better and better and better. Nothing wrong with, trying to do more or being better every day. It's that you're not trying to reach a level that is completely unattainable. And that's one of the symptoms is perfectionism from betrayal trauma. And perfectionism doesn't exist. So just before we get, into this, it's I just want you to know this is a safe space for you. Um, it's hard truths and hope. Hope for healing, hope for your future. Okay. So part of the symptoms here, I'm going to just read what I wrote as an intro, just so because it really gets the gist of what I want to say here. It's when we think about trauma symptoms, we often picture anxiety, depression, which they are symptoms. Just know that. Anxiety isn't an issue itself. Depression rarely is an issue itself. Are there some people that have chronic depression? Yes. And it often starts in childhood or adolescence, and they must be medicated and medicated for life because their body simply doesn't make enough serotonin or to have that chemical balance in the brain. But for most of us, we develop depression from our experiences. And therefore, it is a symptom. It's a symptom of wounding. And when we just treat the anxiety or treat the depression, we're putting a band-aid solution on something that's not going to go away. May feel better for a while. We may be medicated. That may make it feel better for a while, but it's not a long-term solution. Healing the wound is what we need to do. And that's how the betrayal has affected us now, how it's affected us in the past, but how it's impacting us now. And that's what we're healing. Okay. So we often picture anxiety, flashbacks, or nightmares. Flashbacks are daytime nightmares, just so you know. They're awake nightmares. But betrayal trauma shows up in ways that can be harder to see and even harder to link back to the harm that caused them. And what I mean by this is because often in betrayal, there is gaslighting, there's manipulation, always deceit. And that makes us question our reality. And we think something's wrong with us. And we develop these symptoms because that's the beginning stages of betrayal is the gaslighting, the manipulation. It's the psychological abuse that we may not even realize we're experiencing. Hey, I didn't for almost 34 years. And I'm in the helping field. And I didn't realize how groomed I was. I thought it was always me. I was always to blame. And it wasn't until I was out of that situation and in my healing work that I realized, wow, all these symptoms I have been from the psychological abuse that ended up being sexual abuse, financial abuse as well. So today we're going to uncover these hidden signs so you can better understand yourself or someone you care about. Okay. So betrayal trauma symptoms can be overlooked very easily because they can mimic other things. They can mimic, like I said, depression, anxiety, yet those are symptoms. And we think it's all because of the depression or it's all because of the anxiety, you know, or PTSD. We may have symptoms of PTSD. We may actually be diagnosed, and only a doctor can diagnose you, psychologist, medical doctor, including a psychiatrist, can give you those diagnoses with PTSD. But know that PTSD is typically from a single event that can happen. And it doesn't mean betrayal trauma can't be a single event. It certainly can. But with PTSD in a single event, like a car accident or a house fire, there isn't the preclude, if you will, of the psychological abuse that goes with the betrayals, the deceit, the gaslighting, the manipulation, okay? The grooming that happens. And so instead of PTSD, often what research is now finding is that it's actually complex trauma. And complex trauma is at a completely different level than PTSD. PTSD is hard, is hard. Complex trauma is double hard. Just sit with that for a moment. Okay? It's a completely different level, deeper level of trauma. Misdiagnosis is often common without recognizing the betrayal link. And if we don't realize that we've experienced betrayal trauma, it's hard to tell our doctor about what we've experienced and to be able to make that link. So we may have, health issues. And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. We may have health issues that we seem to be fighting off constantly, and the doctors are trying to find out why, or misdiagnosis of one thing over another when it's actually related to betrayal and the psychological abuse that goes with it. There is also a cultural tendency to minimize relational harm. So, and when I say cultural, that can be in various absolute cultures. It can be in a culture that is society as a whole, that we minimize how the relational, and betrayal trauma is always relational, it's always relational harm. The person, the perpetrator, is a person known to the survivor and is in a place of trust and safety. And oftentimes there is a power imbalance. Um, there's always a relational. That's one of the main key elements of betrayal trauma is that relational harm. So there are core behavior, or sorry, betrayal trauma symptoms. So I'm going to read from what I have written in my betrayal trauma course. And then I'm going to break it down to, emotional, cognitive, physical, relational, and in children. So I'm going to read this list, and hopefully I'll slow it down so you can really understand. Okay. Low self-worth. In PTSD caused from what we know as commonly as trauma, we usually do not have low self-worth. But in betrayal trauma, it is a major symptom. Low self-worth. Anxiety, depression, substance use, anger, guilt, shame, even when we haven't done anything, withdrawal. Withdrawal is huge. Withdrawal is I can't say how huge. We tend to isolate ourselves, often because of guilt and shame, also to loyalty to the perpetrator, or if there's been threats made by the perpetrator, and it's like, who's going to believe me? And so we withdraw, and we withdraw from many of those things that we used to love doing. Okay. So, like I said, isolation, we always internalize. That's the next. I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's going to be the next episode, is about internalization. Hypervigilance. Our body is always in a state of hypervigilance, and that is, we startle easily. We are watching for, what's coming next. What mood is the perpetrator in? Is something going to happen today? No. Um, and with hypervigilance, especially when there is substance use or addiction of any kind, porn, sex addiction, for survivors who have found out that their partner is using, a substance, gambling, or has a porn or sex addiction, there is an obsession about what is he or she doing, where are they, who are they talking to, um, are they going online, are they using, um, and this obsession makes us want to check. We want to check the devices. We want to ask these questions. We want to dig deeper. And it's not that we have this obsession because something's wrong mentally with us. It's about safety. These obsessions are about safety. We're trying to feel safe. Oh, I can breathe. He's not using. He hasn't looked up porn today. It's not in the history. Can't find anything. Here's the thing with obsession. We never know. We never truly know. What happens is those who have something to hide will always find a way to hide it. And unless we are really IT savvy and can get into the nitty-gritties, which I am not, of the internet and emails and all that kind of stuff, um, we're not going to know. We have to learn to trust our gut instinct, which Dr. Minwala calls that, our second brain. We're trying to feel safe. And so it's really important that you look within for what you're needing in that moment. Okay. Overwhelm is another symptom, a feeling of being overwhelmed, often. Difficulty concentrating, difficulty regulating intense emotions. Some of these symptoms may be very similar to ADHD. And so I have had clients who, I must have ADHD. I want to get assessed. And I have nothing against that at all. What I really important is that you do your healing work through trauma first, because you may find that these are actually trauma symptoms rather than ADHD, and that you may have had them all your life or most of your life or just in your adult life, and you're realizing. Heal from the trauma first. And if some of these symptoms are still there, then get assessed. Absolutely. But without a knowledge of the betrayal trauma link, any doctor may diagnose you. You may fit, much of the criteria for ADHD and not really have it. So do your healing work first. Symptoms still there. Absolutely be assessed if that's what's important for you. Sleep difficulties, nightmares, night terrors. Now, some of these sleep difficulties may mean that somebody is sleeping a lot more than they usually do, or having difficulty sleeping. And doesn't mean that they don't have trouble going to sleep, but maybe they have difficulty staying asleep. They wake up at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and can't get back to sleep. They're only sleeping 2 or 3 hours a night. This is one of the main areas which I always suggest to clients to speak to their family physician or a specialist if they see a specialist about their sleep hygiene. They may need something to help them get that sleep, even in the short term, because sleep hygiene is one of the number one detriments to our body, which also then creates emotional difficulties, regulating emotions, physical symptoms, health issues. There is so much that sleep helps us with. I will admit, it was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks in after finding out about it could have been a couple of weeks, I'm not sure now, about my husband at the time, that I ended up going on a sleeping medication because I wasn't sleeping. If I got an hour a night, I was lucky. I couldn't shut off. And it was coming out in so many ways that was not healthy in any way, shape, or form. And I had to go on to a sleep medication, and I was only on it for 3 weeks to a month. And then I was able to wean off of it, and I was able to sleep. But it helped me get over the hump, and that's what I needed. Flashbacks. As I said, flashbacks are daytime awake nightmares, and a flashbacks can involve one or more of the senses, something you smell, something you taste, something you may be, seeing, envisioning, something you're hearing, or even touch. Okay, you're touching something and it may bring, a flood of some memory stuff back. Numbness and detachment. We talked about numbness last time, which is alexithymia, and detachment. And it's detaching from everything or most things. Okay. You may go to work, do your job, and you go home. But you're not enjoying what you're doing at work. You're not engaging with anyone else at work. And when you come home, you isolate. Okay. Change of appetite. And that may be you're eating more or less healthy choices, but I'm not worried about that while you're going through your healing journey, because you will get there. If it means that you're curling up on the couch with pizza and Netflix, and you're wrapped in a blanket, that's okay. That's self-care. If that's what you need on any given day, that's what you do. I'm not worried about the quality of food you're eating, is that you're giving your body something to eat, because a change in appetite means many times that people don't eat. And your body needs fuel for energy for survival. Headaches. Headaches can get worse. If you're a migraine sufferer, you may find that your migraines are coming back more and more or triggered often. Tremors. You may find that your hands are shaking. You may go for assessments and have a diagnosis of something that it's because of betrayal. Suicidal ideation is common. That's the thought of suicide because of the deep level of pain. And I encourage you, please, 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 if you have any suicidal ideation, that you reach out to a friend, call a helpline in your area, or talk to your doctor. If you need to, if it feels imminent, call 911. You deserve health and happiness. What was done to you is not your fault. These are symptoms that are because of what happened to you. And you deserve to be healthy and happy. Oxytocin dysregulation. Oxytocin is the love hormone. It's the connected hormone. And this is the one that I'm going to make a quote here from Dr. Jennifer Fried and Pamela Burrows, doctors Jennifer Fried and Pamela Burrow, about oxytocin. Okay. So Fried and Burrow have suggested that oxytocin dysregulation may act as a biological mechanism linking exposure to betrayal trauma with disease outcome. Within the human body, oxytocin dysregulation is closely associated with trust and attachment, both essential for healthy human relationships. In 2013, Fried and Burrow posit that betrayal can damage the endocrine system, the system that regulates hormones. In particular, we suspect that oxytocin dysregulation is a biological mechanism that links exposure to betrayal trauma, interpersonal violence, and abuse at the hands of someone close to the victim. And remember, that abuse can be psychological, which is, it may not have the external scars that physical abuse has, but there are scars nonetheless. You just may not be able to see them. Okay, that links exposure to betrayal trauma with disease outcome. Okay, so the health issues that survivors of betrayal may experience are considerable and not limited to following issues such as irritable bowel syndrome, to chronic pelvic pain, to something as serious and life-threatening as adrenal insufficiency. And this is where what I've developed. So over a lengthy period of time, because adrenal insufficiency means that your body no longer makes cortisol, and cortisol is the stress hormone. It regulates your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body temperature. It has to do with your kidney function, your pancreas, your liver function. There's so many. It's such an important hormone. And for people who develop adrenal insufficiency, whether primary or secondary, it it takes a toll on the body. I have secondary adrenal insufficiency, which means that my pituitary gland no longer makes the hormone needed to make cortisol. The hormone is ACTH, and my pituitary no longer makes it, ACTH. So therefore, my body can no longer make cortisol. I carry steroids with me wherever I go. I take these 3 times a day unless I need to updose. Updose means I've cut the line and my body temperature has gone up or my heart rate is elevated and I have to take an extra dose of steroids to get my heart rate to come back down where it needs to be. Or my blood pressure has dipped tremendously low. I have to just rest and I have to take extra steroids in order to help my blood pressure come back up. It is life-threatening. And I've had 2 of my specialists tell me that the most likely cause of my adrenal insufficiency is due to the amount of stress I was under with the psychological abuse, but especially upon finding out about what my husband was doing. And then the separation and the court proceedings of divorce, which were hell. I can't, more betrayal upon betrayal upon betrayal. I can't even begin to explain. And I developed a life-threatening illness that will be lifelong. My endocrinologist has already told me I will be on steroids the rest of my life. I'm going to go into now the core betrayal trauma symptoms of emotional. So, like I mentioned, shame, guilt, confusion, emotional numbing, to the cognitive. So, difficulty concentrating. The brain fog, by the way, in adrenal insufficiency, low cortisol or no cortisol, is real and it's hell. It takes my brain 2 hours after my morning dose, as soon as I wake up. Your cortisol is normally highest in the morning, and I don't have any. So when I wake up, I take my largest dose of steroid, and it can take up to 2 hours for the brain fog to reduce that I can actually think. Yeah. So memory gaps. You may have memory gaps. You have heard, why can't survivors, the Me Too movement, why can't survivors remember what happened to them, or only snippets? Betrayal. Symptom, memory gaps. Our brain says, yeah, no, that's really painful, and I'm going to put you away. And like I said, the hypervigilance, and with that is the obsession as well. Okay. Physical, fatigue. Fatigue is real. Chronic pain, digestive issues, the gut-brain connection. When we have psychological abuse, mental, emotional, the gut is upset. Okay, huge connection. Sleep disturbances, chronic health issues. Okay, the other thing is that my asthma turned severe, and I now get biologic injections because my body is going, yeah, you were under too much stress for too long, and now I have all these health issues which is the reason I had to retire as a psychotherapist. And I still do some counseling, but I only do it part-time, a couple of days a week, and I have to have rest days in between. Okay. And then chronic health issues such as adrenal insufficiency. But it can also be things like pneumonia when you've never had it before and now you're getting it. Relational. So core betrayal trauma symptoms, relational. Withdrawal, mistrust, because if the perpetrator is in a position of trust and safety and you can't trust that person, who can you trust? So we don't tend to trust many, if anyone. And like I said last week, the secondary betrayal is so prevalent. The recidivism of betrayal is so prevalent that we back up and we don't tell anybody and we don't talk about it. We isolate it. Now we're internalizing it. It's in our body and we're having all of these symptoms. Okay. People pleasing. You just want to be a people pleaser, make everybody happy. Over accommodation. Yes person. Just say yes. Don't want conflict? It's easier just to say yes rather than no. Or I can't right now. I'd love to help you, but I'm not able. Think of me another time. We don't have to say no. We can say it in a gentler way, but hold our boundaries, which would be another podcast again. There's all kinds to go here. And then in children, it's behavioral issues. And that's a child who has experienced behavioral issues, or experienced betrayal trauma is often deemed difficult. Oppositional defiance disorder. It's often from betrayal trauma. If we can work through the betrayal trauma, because here's the thing, a child doesn't have a choice who their caregivers are. A child doesn't have a choice who their babysitter, their teacher, their coach. If they want to play the sport, that may be the coach. And they may act out in different ways. Find out if that's a component, okay? And betrayal, blindness, and symptom complexity. Again, in episode 6, I'm going to talk about betrayal trauma blindness and how staying blind to the betrayal can create additional symptoms. So it's something that is unconscious that our brain does for us. We don't choose to, I don't see it, I don't see it, I don't see it. Our brain does it in survival, and I'll get more into that in episode 6, okay? Self-blame and internalized responsibility. Again, that's going to be next episode. Everyone who experiences betrayal trauma, from a child to, a person who is in their 90s, we internalize. And difficulty connecting dots between symptoms and the betrayal source. Okay. So I've already talked to you about some lived experience, my own experience. And this is common. Health issues are common, I find, in people I have supported through in their healing journey through betrayal trauma. And I'm going to just state again the importance of sleep hygiene and how this will have an impact on one's ability to do the work necessary for healing. And then what comes next is that it's important to name those symptoms and name what happened to you. It's talking about it, even if that's with a therapist. It is, and if the therapist isn't hearing you, isn't meeting you where you are, isn't understanding you, find another therapist. There will be therapists who will understand you and meet you where you are. Naming the symptoms, naming the abuse, naming that it's betrayal trauma blindness, cultural betrayal, institutional betrayal, whatever it is, naming it is paramount to validation. that it has a name, that you're not crazy. In doing so, it helps to understand that the symptoms that you may have are a survival response, not a weakness. That the symptoms is your body's way of saying, hey, wake up, something's wrong here. And it's not a weakness. It's your body's way of trying to communicate with you. And it's about survival. Listen. Listen to your body. It knows. It knows you. Okay. Again, you'll be able to find these resources on my website. The podcast will be on my website, YouTube. Um, all in the description will be, sandrajoy.ca, my YouTube channel, and Instagram. And then as soon as everything starts live, like um, on September 10th, like I said, um, Spotify and all the platforms, the links will be there on each one. And I look forward to communicating with you in the chats and so on. So, just as a reminder, next episode, episode 4, will be on internalization and self-blame and betrayal trauma, and the importance of recognizing how we do that and what our body does for us. So, takeaway for today. Betrayal trauma symptoms often go unnoticed because they're mistaken for other conditions, or they may be attributed to conditions, but the reason for them has been from the betrayal. So making that link is important. That emotional, cognitive, physical, and relational symptoms are all part of the body's survival response. It's all part of how our body tries to communicate with us. And then naming and validating the symptoms is the first step towards healing. And naming and validating what's happened to you is also a major step in healing. Thank you, everyone. I've hoped you gained insight from this session, this episode 3, and I appreciate you watching and sharing, the episode. Until we meet again, I see you, I hear you, and I believe you. Thank you.